I'm Janka Hlavatá. I'm an attorney in our bar office, Smolák Hlavatá. I'm a member of BIM and I'm a co-author of the BIM publication. I would like to talk about this system from the legal perspective. I want to start with a question that I have been asked many times, and Tomáš Puntík has asked me that question as well, and that was whether the legal system of the Slovak Republic allows for entering into contract on information system on construction. And my response was yes, whatever is not banned is allowed, and Slovak legislation doesn't rule out that the contract to be signed on the rights and obligations related to the information system. But if we are to think or if we want to get reference from the past, unfortunately there is no. The Slovak legal system doesn't know IMS or any BIM or information modeling, and the non-existence of legal framework causes various problems, and that is that BIM cannot be used in public designs and public constructions, because the logic in public sector is totally different. We can do only what is stipulated in the law, unlike in the business. So the information, the BIM, is not regulated by the law that applies to the public sector. It also causes the volatility of the legal language used in the sector, and also creates a huge room for discretion, and that results in legal uncertainty of all the actors and stakeholders that are present during the life cycle of the construction and also the digital representation. So what is the major deficit of the Slovak legal system in this context? First, defining BIM. However, we call this module, but it is not defined in the Slovak legislation. When it comes to private law or business law, the absence or non-existence of this legal definition has no significant impact. When we draft contracts, we can refer to certain templates or to foreign experience, and we can also refer to the Slovak technical norms that do not deal with this issue from the legal perspective, but they define BIM or information model of construction. And then defining this notion would be the step number one of how to introduce the BIM into the Slovak legislative system, and could be the light at the end of the tunnel that we will get there eventually. But when it comes to the public law, the deficit of definition or the absence of definition results in the fact that this information system cannot be used in protecting the public interest. What most of the European states use, and that is they use the BIM in public procurement and in public buildings or projects of bigger size. We can't do that. And the major challenge is that the copyright law is totally, in this context, is absolutely not developed. We cannot put this notion or BIM or under any currently valid copyright laws in Slovakia, which leads to huge practical problems. And the state has been claiming that it plans to codify the information BIM, but so far nothing has happened. And therefore, the private sector needs to substitute for the state. The private sector needs to take initiative, create the basic standard, and I think Tomáš Puntík was referring to that in his lecture. And this standard will be, on one hand, voluntary, however, will be used and respected by most of the actors. And only in this way we can achieve a situation that there will be at least the minimum level of legal certainty for all the actors until the state does what it needs to do. And when we talk about the BIM as a subject of copyright protection under the valid Slovak legislation, there are multiple questions. First, whether the BIM can be considered a subject of copyright. In my interpretation, as a whole, it is not, because it is not unique. In pursuant to the legal definition, such a work, the work that is subject of copyright, is a unique piece of work. It's a little bit. It is the absence of this uniqueness is totally visible in case of passportization of the constructions, because it is predefined modeling and predefined process that always needs to be the same. And the same applies when it comes to modeling new non-existent building through BIM, because also in this case, the designer is first modeling architectural work, then he or she adds further elements, and then gradually BIM module emerges or is created, but that is always the same because it is a representation of a module of a construction that will be eventually materialized. But what's important, while BIM as a whole is not a subject of copyright, some of its components or elements are or can be subject of copyright. One of the examples could be architectural design. This is definitely a subject of copyright, and I would like to really focus on that. And the BIM version of the architectural design is only technical representation of a work that is subject to the copyright, but only to the scope that I have just presented, that only the architectural part can be subject of copyright. BIM as a whole cannot be subject of copyright because it has all those other elements. If we take the basic or general definition of BIM, then it is a database of information on construction that serves for its implementation and its maintenance during its life cycle. At the same time, it is a systematically structured as a file of the set of information containing also works that are subject to copyright, and by comparing this definition with the legal definition of a database, we can conclude that it is a database, a 3D database, so to say. So from the legal perspective, it's also interesting to answer the question whether this is a creative or non-creative database. My interpretation is this is a non-creative database, and that's due the structuring of the content of BIM is not a result of creative processes of the author. That means it is a non-creative database because this module has a substantial input from the contractor side part of the, and therefore and the law specifically defines the rights and the level of protection in a database. And the advantage in contrast to the copyright law, this is we can talk that the rights are not only in the hands of the author, but also in the hands of the legal entity.
In the second part of my presentation, I would like to talk a little bit about the comments of the Slovak BIM Association with regards to the prepared amendment of the construction law. So it talks about digitalization of processes in a new unique system, and in our case, we would use the building information model, and therefore we need to codify the language or use the same language so that we can avoid the situation in the future that we would have to amend these new construction laws, because we know that in the future we would be using this building information models more extensively. So we highlighted, or we brought the attention of the legislator that they should change some wording. So, for example, here, if we mention that it should be written in graphical form, then we would exclude the usage of BIM. Also, the word drawing. Again, if we just talk about drawings, this doesn't reflect the needs for the future, because drawings are only part of it, and it doesn't lead to automation in the future, in our view anyway. What we also considered wrong is the usage of the word the document that is used in this new amendment or draft of the amendment. If we talk about document, part of which is text and some graphics, again we exclude the possibility of using building information models. So instead of using the word document, we wanted to use a broader term. For example, the term complex data set, complex building data set, which would be future-proof. That means which would include also the building information models in the future. And then also, as part of our comments, we also mentioned that there is a need to use open formats or open source formats rather than just proprietary formats, because then this would not require you to use a specific software or from a specific vendor. And as part of my presentation, I would also like to summarize that the comments that we comments that we had. Well, if you have, if you want another minute, feel free to do that. Well, I summarized that, so I don't have to go through it, but you can read it at your own leisure. So here are my contact details if someone was interested in contacting me.